Hi, my name's Vanessa Vallely, and welcome to this edition of We Are Tech Women and our inspirational series. I am delighted to be joined by Swati Lay, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Funding Circle UK. So, welcome, Swati.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you for joining us. So, obviously, inspirational series. I believe you've got a truly incredible career history. And so, you're going to tell us a little bit about that. Hopefully, we can impart some tips and motivate all the women in tech that are watching. So, first of all, obviously, I know a little bit about you already, but tell our audience a little bit more about your background. Take me back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Excellent. Thanks, Vanessa. I'm very excited to be here and share my stories, you say, and tips as well. So back to the beginning. So you might be able to tell from my accent that I'm actually not from the UK. So I grew up in New Jersey in the US and did all my schooling in the States. And in terms of my family, I come from a family of engineers, so it probably isn't surprising that I went into engineering when I went to university. I did go to a specific engineering school. I think it was important for me to focus on engineering, but also make sure I was getting a really wide and diverse background. And I think as I thought about kind of what was going to be important, in my working life, that it was important to be incredibly as well-rounded as I could be.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to a liberal arts university, but with a focus on engineering. I can't say, even though I came from a family of engineers, I wouldn't say I knew exactly what I was going to be doing, after university with an electrical engineering degree. I also have got a what we call a certificate in, it's basically a minor degree in engineering management systems. But things started to become clearer, as I went through university, and I certainly focused a lot on the computer science side as I kind of went through my degree. And I think for me, what was really important, or what was really exciting about computer science, was that I could see the results of what I was building pretty quickly. If you think about kind of the physical engineering world, seeing the results of what you've built takes a little bit longer if you're building a bridge, for example.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I really enjoyed about computer science. So, did my degree, in my first 12 years of my career was in the US before I moved to the UK.
What was your first job?
So my first job was as what was called back then a systems engineer at AT&T. Now, I'll be honest. I said I come from a family of engineers. A lot of my kind of family network or family friends also were engineers, and many of them worked at AT&T Bell Labs. And for me, so I kind of knew a bit about the company, or thought I did at least. Knew a little bit about the company, and also as an electrical engineer, Bell Labs is where the transistor was invented. So it was quite this a goal for me to get there. And I was super excited that I was able to work at AT&T as my first job, out of university. And I'd say that it was a learning experience in a lot of ways. Some things I learned what I wanted to do more of. Some things I learned about what I wanted to do less of, probably. So I think the role itself, the systems engineer, is essentially a business analyst. So I kind of wasn't doing coding or development at that point in time. I think I was so eager to get into AT&T that I kind of accepted the system engineer role, maybe not quite understanding what it was. So I was basically working with users of the provisioning systems that communications provisioning systems that AT&T was developing, and working then with the engineers to take those requirements and translate them into specs. That was back in the waterfall days. I think that it became fairly clear to me as I was working with engineers that I wanted to be on the engineering side, rather than necessarily the kind of business analysis side of things. But also I took the opportunity, and I think this is really important. I think for everyone, is kind of, even though it wasn't maybe my ideal job initially. I learned so much. I worked for an excellent manager, an excellent mentor. She was a female mentor, which there weren't that many females on that team. So I felt really lucky, to have such a great mentor that really helped me focus on not just the job, but on life and making kind of good life decisions, as I looked at my career, and also, if I look back at some of the things I did, they were quite incredible. I was kind of thinking about it today, and within about 8 months of starting that role at the age of 21, I was in front of the COO of the business, talking about the billing issues that we had on our provisioning systems and kind of how it was kind of driven by data quality issues, what I was doing to solve those data quality issues, what type of investment we would need. I mean, yeah, it's pretty impressive, at that age. So while it wasn't, as I said, I realized that it wasn't necessarily maybe exactly the role I wanted to do, for the rest of time. I did take lots of learnings from there. I had some great people that I worked with, got some great experiences, and kind of used that, moving forward. And that's kind of been a theme, that constant learning, even if kind of some things aren't perfect with every role.
I love it that you mention and to have that so early on in your career about having that mentorship and having a good manager, because that's probably shaped your own kind of leadership model as you've got more senior in your career, isn't it? So you think that's important?
Absolutely. And I would say that I've had excellent managers. I've had some not so great managers, but I think you learn from every
Yeah.
situation. I think you get so much out of great management. And really, to me, that comes down to someone who is taking the time to understand your needs, someone who is in that more, it's a bit of a cliche term perhaps now, that kind of servant leadership role, really working to take away those blockers that you might have in what you're trying to achieve, and someone who is encouraging you to think bigger, right, than just the day to day. And I think it's been, while I had a formal mentor in that initial role, I would say after that, maybe the mentorship wasn't quite as formal as it was back then. And I've certainly sought out and also mentored others at different points in my career. I wouldn't say I've done it all the time, but I think there are definitely points in my career where I thought I'd really benefit from having someone else to speak to about some of these bigger issues, maybe outside of my business area, outside of my business. I have a mentor right now that I'm working with outside of Funding Circle that I think is it helps me really as I look at, frankly, a role that is bigger than anything I had previously done. So I definitely think that mentorship is incredibly important. I don't think it's a constant thing necessarily. You kind of might need different types of mentorship at different times, and I think it's important to pay it forward as well. And then the management side. I think we flourish under great managers, and even the ones maybe who aren't as great, who are still developing, maybe let's say, even in those situations, I think you learn a bit more about maybe what you want from your next manager.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think sometimes when you have had bad managers, you learn the manager you don't want to be because you're on the receiving end of some of those behaviors or stuff like that. So there is learning to be gathered from whoever. And I think you're quite right, actually, around mentorship at different times. There's sometimes where you're flying, you're doing your job, and then maybe you get a bit of a stretch task and you need someone to help you get to that next level. So great tip there already. Seek out your mentors. You've worked in many incredible organisations, and our paths have crossed somewhere along the line. We've narrowly missed each other. So tell us about that. So obviously an extensive career in banking, investment banking as well, and then now subsequently at Funding Circle. So tell us a little bit about that climb from first job and some of the things that you did, because I know you were CISO, weren't you, as well? Some of the things that you've done in some of those banking roles.
Yeah, definitely. So it was after that first role that I had at AT&T that I talked about earlier that I made the switch into banking. And I wouldn't say I made the switch because I wanted to be in banking. I made the switch because kind of what I was describing earlier. I wanted to be an engineer. So kind of there were two things that kind of came together. I wanted to be an engineer. And when I was in university, I had taken some courses on number theory. Actually, sorry, it was back when I was in school. So even before university, I took some courses on number theory, learned about cryptography. And since then, I've been absolutely just fascinated about cryptography, public key infrastructure. And I thought, oh, this would be great to do as a job. I just don't know, kind of at the age of 16 back then, I didn't know kind of what that could mean. So obviously, I didn't need to be a mathematician, which is kind of what I thought back then. That well, I'm not going to be a mathematician, so maybe I won't have much of a career in that space. But I think what came together in moving to this banking into the investment banking role was that it was a security role. So really figuring out how to secure or help our engineers or developers secure key online banking applications. And really, it was back then that financial services was probably the best place you could get that sort of experience. It was either financial services or the military or government, I would say, maybe not military necessarily. The financial services opportunity came up, probably paid a bit better than maybe a government opportunity would have. But certainly that opportunity presented itself, and I really went for it to be in a security engineering role. So what we were doing back then was we were actually working with the product engineers, so the folks that were developing our online applications, some of the first online banking applications really back then. And we were kind of helping the engineers and developers to understand what they needed to do from a security perspective, to be compliant in this world and just do the best by for our customers in terms of their data. They were like, oh, this is fantastic. But how do we do it? This is really good advice that we should encrypt this piece of information and digitally sign that. How do we do it? We kind of said, yeah, it is quite hard actually. And we were experts, so we decided that we were going to write the components or the libraries that our engineers could use to do encryption in a really simple way, to do digital signatures in a really simple way. We managed all the gubbins of the cryptography kind of, ourselves. So that's when I really started to do kind of a proper engineering role, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. I would say I very quickly kind of moved to a place that we were kind of 5 engineers. We were working on our own. We had a manager, but she had a lot of responsibilities. So we're kind of a bit on our own, figuring out how we're going to kind of develop this system. And I found myself very much moving to a place of thinking about the overall end-to-end delivery process. I developed bug tracking systems, I got us our first source control system and things like that. So it was a bit different back then. We were kind of doing a lot of the things that maybe you take for granted now, at if you're joining an engineering team or organization. And I found that kind of end-to-end management incredibly satisfying. I soon started to manage the team, and then I was really enjoying that management role. So a very kind of probably team lead engineering manager of a very small team, really looking at the end-to-end delivery process, but still very firmly in the security space. As happens in banking, you'll be aware of this. We had a few reorgs. We kind of centralized, decentralized, and I moved into more of what I'd call kind of security operations role. And I would say that was kind of thinking back on this, I wasn't too excited about being tapped on the shoulder to kind of leave my engineering leadership role back then, as I say, like engineering manager role, and go into this operations role. But I kind of thought, you know what? I love security. Let me give it a go. Let me try.
Yeah.
No harm in it. And it took me some time to get to that point, but I'm really glad I did, because that set me down a path that was completely different, probably from what I had envisioned I was going to be doing. So I took this security operations role, which was really about security incident response, established the first security incident response program at the bank, really built, it was the first time I had a global function, and it was the first time I was managing a team globally, a very small team, but a team globally. So that got me experience again that I probably wouldn't have gotten had I stayed maybe down the engineering path that I was on. Then started to take on more roles in security architecture, and then I did all of that, and then kind of took a bit of a break is not exactly the right word, but I met my future to-be husband. He was based in London. I was based in New York, and kind of put the career piece a little bit on hold and kind of said, well, I'm just going to move my life and I'm going to move to London to be with him. I was lucky enough, though, to stay with the company I was with at the time, Merrill Lynch, because obviously it's a US-based bank, but it's a global bank, offices here in the UK as well. And that was the first time in a long time I had actually gone back to an individual contributor role and made a shift from kind of security, which I had been doing for a number of years. And the role was technology risk management. Again, a new role in the bank, working closely with our chief operating officer to really bring that same diligence that we had around credit risk, liquidity risk, to our technology risk as part of our overall operational risk. So incredibly exciting role. Again, a pioneering role really within the bank. And I really enjoyed it. And I think going back to being an individual contributor for it was probably about 2 years, I think I did that role. It kind of brought you kind of wonder, do you have the confidence, do you really have it still, to be able to do an IC role after you've been in management for a while? So that was quite a good confidence builder. I think to do that again. I then moved over into the retail banking world and did again an information security role, one that was very, I guess, client focused on working with our commercial banking clients. And then went back to more of a group security role on the operations side. Then I got, again, one of those taps on the shoulder that I'm really glad I said yes to, but I didn't initially. So a colleague of mine from Barclays was working was the chief information security officer at a gaming and gambling company called Betfair. And I have to say, I hadn't ever considered gaming and gambling. That just wasn't it just wasn't, it never even came into my mind that might be something I could do. So my first reaction was a bit of, nah, I don't think so. Thanks. He said, no, you should really take a look at this. I think you'd really enjoy this role. He was moving on from the role, so he had reached out to me because he thought I could be a good candidate. And again, I'm glad I didn't say no. I'm glad I did, listen to him. He was quite consistent. I wanted to make sure I looked into what this was. Again, as an American, I think that, there's a bit of a different view in terms of legality on gaming and gambling to the UK. So I had to I did my research, spoke to him a lot and decided, okay, why not? Why not go for the role? Why not interview for it? And that was the first chief information security officer role. It was the first time I moved from a big enterprise to a smaller company. It was about 2,000 people at the time, so not tiny, but by the standards I had been in, was quite small. Yes, exactly. And I think what I really enjoyed about that role, I guess first was that it was very much a tech first company. Yes, we call it a gaming and gambling company, but I think most tech folks joined that company because it was an exchange essentially. So the tech was front and center at Betfair, and kind of joining an organization where that was the case was quite, it kind of made me, it just, you feel quite, you feel quite accountable, for the success of the business, and I quite liked that, that feeling. And I think because of the size of the company as well, and because of the role I was in, I felt like I was able to make changes that really had a big impact fairly quickly, as compared to maybe some of the bigger enterprises. So I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Betfair. Inherited but also built a fantastic team. Took on architecture while I was there as well. Also took on technology risk. You probably see a bit of a pattern here. And then I went on maternity leave and had my daughter and decided actually that probably wasn't going to go back to Betfair for a few different reasons. I'd been there for 5 years at that point in time. Thought I'm going to take time off. and I'm going to enjoy that first year with my daughter. I wouldn't say it was all smooth sailing. I kind of feel like my boss in that time, my tiny little girl, was probably the toughest boss I've ever had. But yeah, she but it was a joy to be with
Yeah.
her in the first time and first year. And then in about kind of a year, I decided, I think I'm ready to go back in, and that's when I joined Funding Circle initially as the Chief Information Security Officer. Now this was the first time I joined a pre-IPO company as well, but with a very good path to IPO. And I was brought in as the CISO, again, to really build the team and build the security framework and controls, given that we knew we were going to be a listed company in a couple of years' time. The story is quite quite a lot happened since then. I joined as the CISO, built the team. I was then asked to take on an engineering team here, an engineering team there. I was happy to do so, happy to help. Didn't see those as necessarily permanent things, but kept building a bit more. And then when my manager, who was the Chief Product Officer and Chief Technology Officer, when he was ready to move on in 2019, we kind of looked at it and he said, "You're pretty much managing most of technology anyway. Do you want to take on the role?" And again, I'll be honest, my first response was, "Nah,
Yeah.
thank you, but no, I'm not. I don't think I'm quite ready. This wasn't supposed to be the direction. You probably see a pattern here. I kind of start with a bit of that, He and the CEO at the time as well. The two of them kind of spoke to me, and the CEO was fantastic. He, a great guy, one of the founders of Funding Circle. He basically said, "Look, I know you're thinking this is not for you." He's like, "But I'd like to understand your point of view about what we should be looking for. Can we set up time on a weekly basis to just kind of discuss that so we can build out like what's next for Funding Circle from a tech perspective?" And you can be part of that journey even if you don't want to lead that journey. I think he was very cunning and very clever, because through the course of those weekly meetings, within about a month, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a try. Sure, why not? Type of thing. Again, I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I worked with him and trusted him and kept an open mind, because I'll be honest, this wasn't the path that I thought I was going to go down. But again, I think that being open to opportunities is incredibly important. Sometimes you're not going to take them because there might be something personal that they want to focus on, or something different that you want to focus on. But I think it's kind of making sure you don't kind of just stay on the, well, this was supposed to be the path, this is different, so no. It's kind of exploring, well, what could I get from that opportunity? And then making a decision. You may still say no, but that's okay. It's kind of just making sure you're keeping an open mind. That's been incredibly beneficial for me in my career.
I think, there's lots of things that I took from that is the fact, and a lot of people worry about losing their technical skill, when they moved on to different roles. There's people that worry that, that they haven't run a team and then all of a sudden they find themselves managing a team. There's that element of letting go of the day-to-day and being more strategic in their thinking, but ultimately, nothing's achieved without an element of risk, right? And it seems like you've been prepared to give it a go. And it's really lovely that you kind of acknowledge that when these opportunities first come your way, you've gone, no, I don't want to do that. And then
Too scary.
slowly, you've been convinced. Just for the people that are not aware, tell us what Funding Circle does.
Yeah, of course. So Funding Circle is the UK's largest lending platform for small businesses. Our mission is really to provide the funding that small businesses need to win. So we're very focused on small businesses, helping them with all of their financing needs. And it's been a really incredible journey, actually, from a technology perspective over the last few years with Funding Circle. We provide now instant decisions, so decisions within 9 seconds on average to small businesses that come to us. So it's none of that long waiting that you might have to do at alternative lenders. And I'm really proud that it's been, a technology innovation that has really made such a huge difference for Funding Circle and for all the small businesses that lend with us.
Yeah. So if you're a female entrepreneur and you're watching this, and you want to set up your own business and you're looking for capital, go and have a look at Funding Circle, and you can find out more about them on their website, but also on We Are Tech Women. There's a whole page around Funding Circle, which hopefully you're watching this interview for. So talk to me a little bit about developing tech talent because you guys you're particularly passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I know Funding Circle have done a lot of work in this space. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So when I first took on the role of CTO, I went through my first kind of performance management cycle, the annual cycle that most companies go through, and I noticed a few things. I noticed a bit about the language that managers were kind of using in describing kind of good attributes versus maybe people that needed more development. And there were two things that I noticed in the language. We were kind of favoring individuals who spoke up a lot, without necessarily being invited to do so. We were talking a lot about how people communicated and oh, this person's quiet in meetings, so yeah, I don't think they're necessarily someone that we should be looking at, or not necessarily the strongest performer. And I challenged quite a lot in those initial meetings the managers, and basically said, look, I think we are being gendered, as well as not necessarily doing the best for our non-native English speakers, as a result of kind of what I saw in terms of how we were doing this performance management cycle. So I did a number of focus groups with all of the females on the engineering, on the tech team, as well as non-native English speakers, just to understand a bit more about what they, did they think there were challenges either in the career framework or how kind of how we worked. Got some really good insights. I think the good news was that we could definitely look at some more systemic changes in our career framework, which we did, kind of changing the language a bit, being clearer in some cases around expectations, which helps everybody, but certainly in the groups I spoke to, I think was quite evident that would make a difference. Again, just being careful about language as well, and what we saw as kind of good attributes versus kind of attributes that might be a bit outdated, kind of in how we think about them being kind of important. So frankly, gendered, in my view. So that was kind of one of the first things I did. Along with that, started the kind of first time we really did salary reviews across the team, and made sure we had a focus again on underrepresented areas. Found some things there that needed to be addressed, and I think that was kind of just within a few months of me starting in the CTO role. And I realized, at a company that does generally care, I think we're generally seen as quite a good company to work for. We are we think about diversity, we think about inclusion, but we talked the talk, but then kind of when I got into the detail, I realized there was more to do to walk the walk. So I made sure that, as we looked ahead from that first performance cycle, where we did, a number of activities to make sure we were indeed being looking at equality and inclusion, we took a few more steps past that. So we started to hire in earnest as we, like many companies, after the pandemic, or as we kind of got out of the initial phases of the pandemic, we started to hire again. And I was very clear with our team about my expectations in terms of using this opportunity to really change our diversity targets from a gender perspective. That's where we focused initially, and we had a chance now, right? We were hiring in a big way, so it was really necessary, or it was a good opportunity for us to set ourselves some really lofty goals. As expected, hiring managers were asking a lot of questions about, is this positive discrimination, that sort of thing. But I think what really impressed me was my leadership team, right? They completely understood where we were trying to go, and it felt nice to not have to be the only one, at the leadership team table that was really focused on on making sure we were the best that we can be, and a big part of that was being much more diverse than we were today. And I think that through the hiring in that year, we changed we changed our mix of male to female significantly. I can't quite remember the numbers right now, but I think we went from 13% to 20% on our team in terms of females that first year. So really pleased kind of that we made progress. There's still loads more to do, but it's really been a focus area for me and continues to be. As a female leader, I just think it's incredibly important. But what I think is incredibly impressive to me, and one of my leaders said this to me, he said, as a white male, I feel like it's incredibly important to me, it's incredibly important that he shows that he is supportive, and he's been the biggest champion really on the diversity side, where I think that has made a big difference in kind of bringing a lot of the team along. So really, really very an ally.
Fantastic. So we're concluding the interview with a couple more questions. What advice would you give for ladies who are in tech, who are watching this, that aspire to senior positions? So what are the kind of career nuggets that you would like to pass on to aid them in that journey?
Excellent. Yeah, question. I think one thing I would say is don't be afraid to go beyond, what you're specifically asked to do. I think it's, I'm not the loudest person in the room. I'm not the one always speaking up, but I am always kind of watching, looking for connections, looking for, well, actually, and I think I've had that since, since I started working. You kind of see something that might not be working as well, somewhere where you could help that maybe is a bit outside of your area. Just go for it, and it might not always be diving in. It might just be making the recommendation. It might just be saying, hey, actually, you're doing this. I'm doing that. Do you want to? Shall I pass on, a bit of what I've been doing? I think that could be helpful. I think it's helping to keep that bigger view that helps you from a day-to-day work perspective, but also I think shows that you have that bigger picture, which is really what senior leadership is all about, being able to look again beyond your functional area and think about the bigger picture. So I think that's quite important. Like I said, you don't have to be kind of raising your hand, being the most vocal one in the room in order to do that. You just have to be kind of working with people and keeping your eyes open, to opportunities and places where you can help. So I think that's important. Another thing for me was also, very relevant to this conversation, joining groups like FinTech Women at Funding Circle, Women at FC, I should say, at Funding Circle. I see, while I did it not because I wanted to become, a senior leader, because I was passionate about it, as we talked about earlier, I do think that leading that initiative, leading that circular group is part of why I'm in the role I am today at Funding Circle. I think it shows that you're passionate, about something, that you're willing to invest your time to make a big difference and bring your expertise, to an area that you feel passionate about, that's good for the company, that's good for society. And I think that sort of, again, stepping outside of your day-to-day role and taking some of those opportunities to do things that you're passionate about, through the company, I think is also, it's good for you. And I think it's good, again, for you to get maybe visibility to other senior leaders who are also interested in that particular area. And I do think it is one of the reasons I was recognized kind of for this role. Again, someone who's looking bigger and beyond her day to day. And I think my final piece of advice is kind of what I've been saying earlier. Just be open, be open to opportunities. And it's not to say take every opportunity as it's presented to you. I don't think that's necessarily right, but it's just being open to it and making sure you're making as good a decision as you can at that point in time when opportunities do come up.
Absolutely. Sound advice. And again, it goes back to this thing about taking a bit of risks, being, as you say, being open-minded, getting involved with extracurricular activities. We absolutely love that. And I think also, if you go back on Swati's story, there's a lot around kind of using your network as well. The mentorship is there as well. So Swati, one last thing. Is there a mantra by which you live by? Is there a
Yeah.
saying? You've all got one, right?
So I think it is be open. It may not be the most exciting, mantra, but for me, it is be open, take chances, take calculated risks, like you said. But I think probably I'd summarize it most in be open in your thinking. It probably comes down to having a growth mindset as well, but certainly the way I think about it is just being open.
Fantastic. So I hope you've enjoyed this interview. I've certainly enjoyed talking with you, Swati. Again, such an extensive career, full of different tips and turns, but it's all worked out exceptionally well. So for those of you watching want to find out more about Swati, I take it we can find you on LinkedIn. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, of course. Yes, exactly. I have Swati Lay on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And if you want to find out more about Funding Circle, you can visit their website. You can find out a little bit more about them on We Are Tech Women. And I know they're always hiring and looking for exceptional talent. So if you're in the job market, do get in touch and see what opportunities lie ahead. But it just leaves me to say thank you so much, Swati, for joining me. Incredible to chat with you. And, we're very, very proud to have you as partners. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vanessa. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. Thanks.
Thank you.